during any of those posts that you see, you can make a comment, get a hold of your driver manager, get a hold of Eve and HR. Any of these people will help you get on the podcast, and I would love to have you. To the office staff out at H&M, huge thanks. They are always coming through with great interviews, great content. Eve is always sending me things so that I have something to talk about, and I'm not just sitting here flapping my gums in the breeze. H&M has been an absolute great company to work with as far as this podcast is concerned, and it's important to me to spend a couple of minutes and say thank you. So let's get on to the episode. Now, this week, we're talking about managing mountain passes. And mostly we're talking about the driving aspect of that, but we'll get into a little bit of the safety and maybe some pre-check stuff when we talk to safety manager Dean Edmunds a little bit later on in the show. Now, I understand it's like the 1st of September. Why are we talking about this already? Well, you're going to be surprised, but as we get into this podcast a little bit, you'll understand why some driving, I guess, what you would call them laws or restrictions start to take place around September. In fact, this is going to be our last podcast where our recurring segment is Mandatory Fun with Marcus. And I've got a great segment for that lined up, so stay tuned for that as well. But starting next week, on next week's episode 27, we're going to start the Bambi Report. Because guess what? With September comes hunting season. With hunting season comes animals on the move. You're going to see a lot of deer out moving around, maybe some elk, maybe some moose, depending on where you're at. Up here in the Pacific Northwest, we are not beyond seeing a black bear run across the road from time to time. Your rodents, your raccoons, maybe even a beaver. Look, what I'm saying is it's becoming that time of year. Summer's turning into fall, regardless of how much some of you don't want it to. And winter's not coming soon enough for some of you out there. So it's time for us to make that transition from summer to fall, and this is the episode we're using to do it. We're going to help you out with managing mountain passes and all of the things that go into it. We'll talk to Jim Musel from the shop about some maintenance things that you can be looking out for, and we've got driver Scotty Beals coming on for his second driver profile. I'm stoked about it. I hope you are too. It's the H&M Trucking Podcast, episode 26. Make sure to smash that subscribe button, share this with all your friends, and once again, all you have to do is interact with us in some way, shape, or form if you want to be on the podcast yourself. Let's get to the beef.
From Omaha, Nebraska, to whatever lane you're driving, this is the H&M Trucking Podcast with your host, Marcus Bridges.
Joining us here on the H&M Trucking Podcast is safety manager Dean Evans to talk a little bit about managing mountain passes. Dean, thanks so much for being here.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Dean, if you could give me one real standout thing from a safety perspective that drivers should always have in the back of their mind when it comes to mountain passes, regardless of weather, what would it be?
I would say more than anything, reduce your speed and leave some extra space between you and the other vehicles on the road.
I think that's a great one. It doesn't take much of a downgrade to make 80,000 pounds probably feel like 500,000 pounds, I would guess. Anyway, I've never had that much strapped to my back, but I have been next to some trucks going down some pretty steep downgrades, and I'll be honest with you, it looks terrifying to me when I watch it happen.
Yep. Gravity's a pretty basic thing. It affects everything, so be ready for it.
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing that I've noticed, too, going down some of these grades is you start to smell brakes. You start to smell the heat of some of the brakes of not only truck drivers, but also drivers around you that have taken the grade way too quick. And once those things go away, it's nothing but a runaway truck ramp for you. Have you had any experience with drivers needing to use a runaway ramp anytime recently?
No, that's one thing I've never dealt with in my safety history or in my trucking career, is I've never had to have a conversation with a driver that's had to use a safety ramp.
That's good. I think that's probably something you'll hold on to with some pride until it happens, yeah?
I think so. One of the criteria is here at H&M, we're looking for somebody that's got at least 2 years of driving experience. I think your more tenured drivers tend to have that knowledge already that, how to use your brakes and not overuse them. So hopefully, just experience in itself is enough to have kept us out of that situation.
And what type of things on the pre-trip can we be aware of, or things that we can double check on the pre-trip that'll help us in mountain passes driving?
Well, obviously you want to make sure that your tires are all properly inflated. You want to make sure that your brakes are in good condition. You don't have any air leaks. Probably something that's a little less common, but want to make sure that, depending on the weather, that your windshield's clear and you got plenty of washer fluid, to make sure that you still have that visibility out the front.
Absolutely. And especially in places that put any kind of de-icing chemical on the road, I've noticed that windshield wiper fluid all of a sudden becomes a necessity because that stuff gets on your windshield and maybe you get rained on a little bit and you're just rubbing it back and forth with your windshield wipers. It's not too long until you've got this really weird film across the outside of your windshield that it almost kind of reflects the sunlight. It's really hard to see through.
Correct. Yeah. It kind of amplifies its sunlight. So it's harder for your eyes to adjust and make sure you're still visible.
It's funny to me. I guess funny is probably a bad word, but it's interesting to me to think about these things because, there's so many people that just get in their rig and fire it up and off they go without ever thinking about anything safety related other than maybe buckling their seatbelt and using a blinker. But there's way more that goes into it when you've got so much weight on your back and when you're driving such a big rig, especially when it comes to mountains. And people are going to hear this episode in August or the first week of September, and they're going to think, why are we talking about this already? I think that's part of the reason we're bringing this up so early is because you should start thinking about it, right? You should be thinking about it even in the best of weather. But as the weather starts to turn, it's got to be real front of mind awareness.
Exactly. The one thing to know is, in some states like Colorado, and that they have, chain laws that go into effect, and you need to be aware of those things, making sure that you have the proper equipment. And when you're in those mountain passes, it's not uncommon for it to snow in September, October, where it may not in some of the lowlands places you're used to traveling.
Sure. Well, I would like to, I don't know how many four-wheelers there are that listen to this podcast, but every now and then I feel like it should be my job to kind of address them. And something that four-wheelers can be looking for, you mentioned tire chains. If you've got a driver pulled over on the side of the road and he's chaining up, there's a lot of passes that have nice chain up areas. There's plenty of room on the shoulder. And then there's also those passes that don't have anything for room. It's a very narrow shoulder and you're working with a really big piece of equipment trying to get those chains on as fast and as safely as you can. If you're a four-wheeler out there, pull over and give them some room. It's something I don't see as many drivers do as I would like to. Just, even if you got to stay in the passing lane for a couple of minutes and you're not driving at the speed of light, that's okay. You'd probably rather hold up traffic in the left lane for the time it takes you to pass by a parked big rig than accidentally clip a driver or something like that.
Exactly. I mean, that rule should just be anytime there's a vehicle in the right lane, whether it's broken down or somebody's putting chains on or they're doing something, emergency vehicle. If there's something on the shoulder, you should always get over. You may slow up the flow of traffic in the left lane a little bit, but the potential danger of being in that right lane, striking somebody is too intense to ignore.
Absolutely. Dean, we always love having you on. You know what? Whenever I talk to you, I feel like I'm going to leave the conversation a more safe driver, and I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for your time today, and we'll be sure to have you on again soon.
You bet, Marcus. And one thing to know, I mentioned briefly Colorado chain laws. Those chain laws go into effect September 1st. So that's, as we speak, that's right around the corner. As this message goes out, it'll already be in place. So, be aware those things are in place because that potential for bad weather is right around the corner. So be ready for it.
Man, you make me look good, Dean, when you say something like that. I'm right on time with this episode. Thank you so much, man. We'll talk to you soon, Dean.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Knowledge and stories from coast to coast. This is your driver profile.
Time for one of my favorite parts of the show. We've got another driver profile hot and ready for you. He's been on the show with us before, but it's been a while. Please welcome back Scott Beals. Scott, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for making time for us drivers. Probably would make a difference in the way us drivers are perceived by the American public.
You know, I hope so. I've had so much fun, and I've learned so much talking to all the drivers that I've gotten to talk to, both from H&M and beyond H&M, just doing this podcast. And, you know, I've had some people around tell me that, like, you probably know more about trucking now than the average driver or the average person that actually takes an interest in trucking. And I have you guys to thank for that, Scott. You've taught me so much. I also feel like I'm less of a liability on the road driving around you guys.
Well, thank you. That's our job.
Do you feel like your job gets made harder on a day-by-day basis by people that don't respect what you're driving in and don't respect the skill and the preparation it takes to get it from point A to point B safely?
Sometimes, yes. In your bigger cities, they're in such a big rush, and they don't give us room. They cut in front of us and cuts our stopping time down. Most of us leaves a cushion between a vehicle in front of us and the vehicle to our left in another lane. We try to leave ourselves an out. That is what we try to do. And then people pass us on the right, and they don't understand the dangers of passing us on the right. So I probably have brought that up before.
Well, I hope so, Scott, because I don't feel like it's something that we should leave out. I don't know how many four-wheelers are going to listen to this podcast. I hope a bunch of them, because I do feel like, speaking to you drivers out there, you guys see this every day. And what I realize over time is that you're all dealing with the same stuff over and over and over again. And it shouldn't be that hard to educate four-wheelers and just make it a couple of ticks safer out there. You know, you think about, let's use a percentage. Let's say we could make it 2% safer out there on the road. How many lives would that save? How many injuries? How much money? I mean, there's countless good aspects to being safer on the road, and there's very few, if any, to being less safe.
Correct.
Do you feel like there's anything that we should be doing each and every week on this podcast to try to help educate four-wheelers other than what we already do, Scott?
That's a question that's kind of hard to answer, but I think they should, when the people are getting their driver's license. Some states has that on there about how to drive around, have some questions how to drive around big trucks. They're trying to introduce speed limiters for us big trucks, and speed limiters on the big trucks is not a solution. That is a worse problem. People driving over 100 miles an hour in the cars and dodging in and out of traffic. You're just asking for trouble.
Yeah, I would think that limiting the speed of the trucks, not letting you guys move with the flow of traffic when you're able, could cause a lot of problems. So you're obviously against the implementation of a speed limiter. Do you know, are they trying to make this kind of a federal thing where it's across the whole United States, has the same law, or is this a state by state thing that they're trying to implement?
No, they're trying to do it. FMCSA was trying to do it out of their office, and Congress has put a stop to it. Whoa, hold up here. That's beyond your scope. You can't do that. So, so far Congress has put a stop to it, but they're doing studies and stuff like that. So I have met with my congressman in Arkansas, Prince Hill. I went to his office while I was home, sat down and talked with the representative.
I think that's something that's often overlooked, Scott, in our current political environment. You know, a lot of people like to run right to the internet or post on Twitter and Facebook, you know, all the things that they think are wrong with politics and with this politician or that politician. And when I was coming up through school, it was always call your congressman, call your representatives. Their numbers are there. You can call them and leave them a message. You can write them letters. You can go in and actually sit down and talk to them. Do you feel like that's an effective way to kind of get past all the noise and get right into the ear and possibly spur some change?
I think so. And I am, of course, a member of OIDA, Owner Operators Drivers Independent Association. I'm on my 35th year for Safe Driving Award through OIDA.
Wow, and that's amazing.
So
congratulations on that.
It takes work out here in the truck to dodge incidents. And a lot of people, especially cars, don't understand that big trucks, I would say about 95, maybe 96% of big trucks has cameras in them. So they know what the companies that we work for or work with, they know what's going on out here, and they can see. Four-wheeler, I did this. I didn't do that. It's on camera, black and white, and tells what the real story is.
Sure.
Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not perfect. I'm not a perfect driver. Before I paint that picture, no. I'm a human being. I make mistakes too. And it tells that story also. So.
And I think that it tells the larger story that it tells kind of zoomed out, Scott, is that nobody is a perfect driver. Even someone that's got a 35-year safe driving record with ORIDA, you're still prone to, overlook something or react a fraction of a second too late. That doesn't make you a bad driver. It just, like you said, it makes you human. So you said you've got 35 years of safe driving under your belt. How many years have you been driving for, Scott?
This November will be 48.
Wow. That's amazing. And how long have you been with H&M? Remind me.
This March will be 3 years.
And with all that experience under your belt, what can you tell me is different about H&M from other companies that you've worked for? What do you like more about it? Is there anything that you like less that you think should be changed?
The only thing I can say that should be maybe changed is should have an ideal scale. I know it costs money. I understand that. But I should have a airbag scale on the trailer so that we know where our weight is. They've got airbags on the tractor, and we've got a scale on our tractors. And we know what the weight is on the fifth wheel. So, but I think it should be more active onto the trailer also. I've got a couple warnings about being over on my trailer. So.
And what about H&M do you like more than some of the other companies you've worked for?
Especially my driver manager. My driver manager has 20 years over-the-road experience. And I really like him. And I can tell the difference when he is not in office. We end up with not so desirable runs. So.
Okay. And well, let's call him out. Let's give him a shout out here on the podcast. He might be listening. What's your driver manager's name?
Terry Mickelson. He has 27 to 30 drivers, and he has said numerous times that he is proud of every one of his drivers, especially when he runs night shift. He can tell the difference because most of his drivers solves the problems that is presented to them. Unless they can't get it solved, then they call after hours to get that situation either resolved so that the company can find out how to resolve that situation.
Mm-hmm. Well, hats off to Terry. I mean, that kind of experience for a driver manager over the road is amazing, and I'm sure that it helps him. He's just going to know things that other driver managers aren't because of that experience, I assume.
Yes, sir. I enjoy working with him. Sometimes he thinks I'm a little bit more personal with him. I ask him when he comes back, hey, did you have a family issue? Is there anything we can do to help you in your situation? And he is so amazed. Well, to play into that, I was a non-commissioned officer in the United States Army. And this is what I did in the Army, too, was drive. And that's the reason I have so many years of experience. And I care for my soldiers. And I care for my people that's around me and I'm working for, I'm working with, or working under me. Trucking industry, I don't think of people working under me. They just work with me. Mm-hmm. And it's hard for the civilians, because I'm always military. It's hard for the civilians to work as a team. I don't care if you're purple with pink polka dots. I don't care if you wear a bra and panties. I don't care. When you step down in a fighting position with me to defend this great nation, you better be ready to do your job. You definitely ain't going to like what's going to happen next. So,
for sure. Well, for me and everybody here at the podcast and beyond, thank you for your service to this great nation. And, you know, having guys like you out there is the reason that we get to do what we get to do every single day. And do you feel like that kind of family mentality really runs throughout the company? Like you said, you're personal with your driver manager, Terry, and you're concerned about him. Is that something that kind of flows through H&M as a company as a whole?
More than some companies I've worked for, the company I worked with, it was more family oriented because our job was dangerous of what we did. We hauled explosives, ammunition, and radioactive material. And it was, I don't know the correct English word for it, but it was more dangerous than what I do now. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. But now a corporation has that company. Two corporations has that company. It's less family oriented. So I hope I worded that correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's something that the reason I asked the question, Scott, is because I talk to so many people that work for H&M almost every day of the working week. And what I do hear is that people that have come from other companies really do feel and believe that this company is more family oriented, not just because of, how it started and who's running it and everything like that, but also just because that's the culture that's been instilled. H&M cares for their drivers. They're going to do a little extra work. They'll deadhead you home. They'll get you back if you need to be back. If you've got some sort of family emergency, I've actually had a driver scheduled here just in the last couple of weeks for a driver profile like we're doing right now. And when I called him to do the interview, he said, listen, it's not a good time for me. I've got a family emergency. I'm headed home. H&M did a great job getting me back to where I need to be. You don't get that with every company. It seems like you're more of a number for some of these bigger companies, and it's cool to see H&M actively try to change that and to instill that in the culture of the entire company.
Well, I've had an incident. I'm going through an issue changing my disability percentage with the VA. Well, they do not work friendly with you for scheduling doctor's appointments for that. Mm-hmm. And so Terry a couple times had to jump through some hoops to get me home to get to a doctor's appointment for that. My regular VA appointments, I don't have too many problems with that. I schedule my home time around my VA appointments, and it works out great. I go out between 4 to 6 weeks at a time. Then I go home for a week. My wife, she keeps track of my VA appointments, and we schedule our home time around that. H&M is always on top of things to get me home.
Well, they want you at the top of your game. And if you can't see your doctor, you can't get your benefits moved around, you can't get home time when you need home time or you want home time. These are all little things that chip away at that rough exterior of a professional driver. And sooner or later, if you've got a company that won't work with you on that stuff, why would you even want to bring your best to the table every day other than just the safety aspect of it? So it makes a lot of sense to me that this is why H&M tries to be the way that they are. And I'm glad to hear it, man. I hate hearing that the VA jerks you around when you're trying to change up your benefits, because in my opinion, and I'm not a former serviceman, I just am somebody that has a tremendous amount of respect for former servicemen and current servicemen and women. I think the VA, you should be nothing but a quick phone call away, and that stuff should all get taken care of in a heartbeat for you because of what you've given of yourself to the country. Unfortunately, I'm just one guy, in my opinion, and 50 cents won't buy you a good cup of coffee. But I'm sorry to hear that, Scotty, because I can't believe that it should ever be hard for you guys to mess around with that type of stuff and get it worked out the way you need to.
Yeah. I want to give another shout out to the maintenance crew that H&M has. They are excellent maintenance crew they got down there that takes care of us, including the ladies in the office and, of course, the people that's boots on the ground down there at the shop that gets things done for us to get our trucks fixed and get them back on the road.
Hats off to the maintenance crew and Jim and everybody down there at the shop, running a tight ship for sure and keeping you guys on the road, keeping you all safe. And speaking of safe, real quick, today's episode is about managing mountain passes. I know that we're a little bit early on this, but is there any advice that you might give to a new driver, just so we can touch on our topic real quick about managing mountain passes as the winter driving season approaches us, Scott?
Yes. I have thought about this. Some drivers, some of the older drivers, are worried about younger drivers, how fast they drive. Don't outdrive your abilities. Drive at your speed that keeps you and your vehicle safe. Don't get in a hurry and don't let other people push you to make a mistake, and then you will have a bad ending.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I've heard the adage before, don't drive in your rear view mirror. Basically, you gotta worry about what's in front of you more than what's behind you. Don't be worried about people trying to pass. Don't be trying to keep with the speed of everybody that's coming up behind you. Just drive as you will and drive as you're safe and comfortable.
Correct. And also, don't worry about other people, their driving abilities. What I'm saying is, if it's too slick for you to be on that road, don't worry about other people. If it's too slick for you to be on that road, get off. Find a safe place for your vehicle to park it.
Yep. Goes all the way back to when your mom would ask you when you did something stupid as a kid and she said, well, why'd you do that? And you said, well, because my friend Johnny was doing it. What would she always say? She'd say, if Johnny jumped off a bridge, would you jump off a bridge too? Absolutely not, Mom, right? That's the one. And if that's kind of the same thing you're saying, just because the Swift driver or just because the UPS driver is taking on that road doesn't mean that you have to.
Correct. Hope that was good advice.
It is. It's great advice, and from a very seasoned and proven safe driver. And these are things that I think are, some people might hear it and try to take it with a grain of salt, but I think you're listening to one of the guys that's been out there longer than most right now, and he's got a pristine safety record. So take his advice and heed it, if you will. But, Scott, we're up against the clock here. I want to give you an opportunity. I've been doing this lately with my driver profiles, giving the driver an opportunity to have the floor and say anything that you want to say, whether it be to your fellow drivers, the company, myself included. Say what you will, please, before we let you go.
I want to say to all of my drivers, all the drivers that drives these trucks, thank them so much for keeping America moving during COVID. They did an excellent job. They did not take all the precautions that people at home took, and they got COVID more than us drivers did. And us drivers, we've always got to take care of each other, do what's best for us, and be safe. Let people on the freeway, even though we know that they won't let you on the freeway when it's your turn to come on the freeway. So you've got to stay safe and have a great day.
There you go. Because last time we had you on here, I was excited for the sign-off the entire time. You got a good sign-off for us today?
I do. May the good Lord be with you wherever you may travel. Be well and be safe. And as Spock used to say on the Starship Enterprise, live long and prosper, my friends.
Beam me up,
and
Scotty.
There is no intelligent life form here on this planet. Beam me up, Scotty.
Hey, we really appreciate the time as always, Scotty, and we want you to be safe out there, okay? Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
You bet. Take care and be careful.
All right, it's high time for some mandatory fun with Marcus, and even though I said high time, no, we're not getting high, so please don't do that. We talk to drivers here. We don't need to be thinking about that type of thing, okay? We are going to get to some mandatory fun. I've got a little bit of a Facebook post that I want to get to with some responses that really run the gamut between hilarious, appropriate, and very inappropriate. And we'll get to all that in just a second. But first, let's get to some news. We haven't had any breaking news here for a while, and of course, breaking news is hard to do when you record the episode a full week before it launches, but this stuff is news that will still be in effect by the time you hear this episode. This comes from Transport Topics. Actually, all of these stories coming from Transport Topics today. Florida and 4 other states have issued emergency waivers for commercial motor vehicles that remain in effect for varying periods up to a month to deal with the aftermath of Hurricane Idalia. Idalia hit the northeast side of Florida on August 30th as a Category 3 hurricane swirling toward the southeastern U.S. coastline. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis issued 2 emergency waivers for commercial motor vehicles, and certain hours of service requirements and size and weight restrictions were lifted. Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Kentucky posted similar orders August 29th after Idalia made landfall near Keaton Beach, where the Florida Panhandle curves around the Gulf of Mexico. It brought maximum sustained winds of 125 miles per hour. There was a lot of downed trees, a lot of flooded roads, and it even spun off some tornadoes. So it looks like there's going to be a few restrictions lifted and some emergency orders there that'll maybe help in the aftermath, cleaning up that mess. You know what? You drivers out there are the ones that are getting all of the materials that are needed to fix these problems to where they need to be. So makes sense to me. Lift some of these restrictions, get the drivers out there, get the people the goods that they need so that they can rebuild. And, you know, same thing kind of goes for our friends over in Lahaina, Maui. Such a tragic thing that happened there with the fires. And I know that, you know, you might not think Hawaiian Islands and trucks, but trust me, if you've ever been over there, there are some trucks running around out there, and those guys are doing the Lord's work right now as well, bringing goods and services to the people that need them in disaster-ridden areas. Moving on, FMCSA proposes changes to carrier fitness determination. Federal trucking regulators are seeking public comment on a proposal to modify the current 3-tier safety motor carrier fitness rating structure, including a review of data and other resources available for helping determine a carrier's fitness to operate. Now, I'm sure some of you drivers heard the word fitness and thought, they better not be making my fitness card or my health card harder to get. It doesn't have to do with the drivers. This is about carriers. The new FMCSA's advance notice of proposed rulemaking was posted in the Federal Register on August 29th, and it could allow the agency to scrap or modify the current way it evaluates motor carrier fitness and perhaps even develop a new method that could incorporate the agency's compliance, safety, accountability, safety, and measurement system. Safety fitness determinations are currently based on an analysis of existing motor carrier data collected during an investigation, and a compliance review conducted at a carrier's place of business and or remotely through a review of its records using a secure portal. So these are all things just for the FMCSA to look at a carrier and say that carrier's fit, that carrier's doing well. They're thinking about changing the way that they go about that. Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. I'm not going to claim to have enough knowledge of how they do this to make a determination on that, but If you have anything to say about it, please do reach out to us. Leave a comment on our advertisements on Facebook for the podcast episode. I would love to hear your feedback out there. And finally, a little more fallout from the whole Yellow debacle. The headline says Yellow shutdown opens up LTL market for competitors. The Yellow Corp shutdown is having a downstream effect on less than truckload space as freight volumes flow toward competitors. The Nashville, Tennessee-based transport holding company ceased operations on July 30th. We all know that. After nearly a century in business, it declared bankruptcy about a week later. The company was highly focused on the less than truckload segment through subsidiaries like YRC Freight. Its freight volumes have already started shifting to competitors with assets expected to follow. There's a quote here. Quote, there's enough capacity in the LTL space to absorb the Yellow business. This is according to Kevin Day, who is president of less than truckload business AFS Logistics. More from him. A lot of that has to do with just the slow progress that this all unfolded. It's not an abrupt event that happened over a weekend. But it looks like everything's going to be good. It looks like maybe some LTL carriers will get a little bit of extra business here. Yellow was a big company, and there's going to be a lot of gaps to fill. As we talked to Tim Kruger about this all the way back at the end of July when this was going down, Tim said you might see the needle wiggle a little bit in LTL. It's not going to be substantial, but you probably will see some effect on the market. That's your news. And moving over to the fun stuff, the mandatory fun part of Mandatory Fun with Marcus, I thought, what's fun? Like, what can we do here that would be fun? And so I found a post on one of my favorite Facebook pages. It's called Rubber Side Down, by the way. You guys can go and check that out. It's a private group for truck drivers only. The question was asked, share your story. What is the most fun you've had while OTR? And as you can imagine, friends, some of these responses are not apropos of what I would call a family podcast. Now, we're not necessarily a family podcast. We know who we're talking to here. So I'm going to read these, but there's a chance that you might just hear a series of beeps. It depends. Eve will listen to this. She'll give me her opinion on it. But what's the most fun you've had while OTR? The first response is about prostitutes and drugs in 3 different cities. So I'm going to leave that one to your imagination. But it's the same thing in all 3 cities. And those cities are Atlanta, New Orleans, and Fort Lauderdale. Moving on. Christian says, when I was with CR England passing through Montana and got to see the location of Custer's last stand, the Battle of Bighorn, that is my best memory OTR. That was kind of what I was looking for. There's so many landmarks out there that you guys pass by when you're driving. I've always been curious if you decide to spend any of your time at these places. I know that can probably be kind of a chunk out of your paycheck because not all these places are free just to go see, but there are plenty of them that are free. And that's exactly what I was hoping for in some of these comments. Chris says, delivering fuel all over the country, the best part was to pull over and walk out in the Utah desert and camp out there. But there are an insane number of mice at night. There's probably also scorpions and snakes and shit, dude. I mean, this is the desert in Utah. Look, that's awesome. That's brave, but that's really cool. Like, you just go on a walkabout and have a vision quest on your 34. I love it. Chris, thank you for that. That's huge. There's a lot of stuff about lot lizards in here. Let's just be honest. I don't know how honest any of these are. They might just be people making jokes, or they could be people telling the absolute truth. And once again, I'm going to have to leave those to your imagination because I want this segment to make it to air. Carl says he liked to show his wife and his kids the country. It's cool, man. If you get a chance to take your wife with you or your family, I know certain companies have certain policies about family members riding along, but if you're with a company that lets your wife or your kids or whoever ride along with you, I imagine you can make some real memories out there. That's like being on a family road trip. There's just a job that's got to be done there. Of course, that's only if your kids are well behaved back there in the sleeper. I could see that getting a little distracting. Scott says, when I was a driver trainer for Boyd Brothers, I really enjoyed having students with me. Most were country boys around my son's ages. I watched out for them, paid for their meals, made sure they showered each day, had spending money, were properly dressed, and had smokes if they needed them. That's awesome. How could you ever ask for a better trainer than Scott? He's buying you smokes. I feel like he's like, I don't know how many of you guys are Trailer Park Boys fans out there, but if you've ever watched that show, like Scott would basically be your Jacob. Like, Jacob smokes. And all of a sudden, Corey smokes. Like Jacob and Corey. It's how having that guy there. But he also says he had to make sure that they showered each day, which, while that's a very nice thing to do, I don't know that I would want to be the one that was shouldered with that responsibility, because how do you check? You can ask them, take their word for it, or you could probably just sniff them and know whether they were lying or not. Once again, Scott, thank you for doing that and not leaving it to anyone else. Trey says, when I had my CLP with my trainer, he is still a great friend to this day. We both drive and talk quite frequently. I never thought a job that isolates people like this one would give me friendships that could last a lifetime. That's awesome, man. You're out there on your CLP with your trainer and you get a lifetime friend out of the deal. I've heard some horror stories about trainers falling asleep at the wheel, yelling at their trainees, all sorts of crazy stuff. Doesn't sound like Scott is that type of trainer, and it sounds like Trey had a trainer a lot like Scott who was very good to him. Thanks, everybody that replied. I mean, this isn't my thing, but it was really cool to read some of the stories. The last one I'll bring you is from Jeff, which has a funny typo in it. I think it's a typo, unless this is just a turn of phrase that I haven't heard before. Jeff says, what happens on the road stays on the toad. So, once again, up to your imagination to tell me whether or not that is a typo or there's something behind that I probably can't describe on this podcast. That's it for Mandatory Fun with Marcus. How about an eagle screech to close it out? Joining us now on the H&M Trucking podcast is Service and Equipment Manager Jim Musel. Jim, thanks for being here. It's been a while since we last talked. How's everything going out there in Omaha?
It's going good. It's getting warm out again.
That's what I hear, man. I saw your guys' heat index was like 120 or something like that last week.
Yeah, it was miserable.
Is there anything that you guys need to watch on the trucks when the heat gets like that?
Oh, we just got to make sure that we got our tires is the biggest thing, man. With the heat, you got tires. If they're underinflated, they're blowing, and that's where we're running into problems. It's just the low inflation of tires.
For sure. I saw some crazy videos of some of the heat around the country where tires would actually like melt if they've sat there long enough. And no, thank you. I'll stay out here in the good Pacific Northwest where we get a breeze every now and then.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to switch gears with you a little bit here and talk more towards the winter side of driving. Is today we're discussing managing mountain passes. And the reason I wanted to have you on is because of your breadth of experience here. Talk to me a little bit about the maintenance side of mountain pass driving and how the drivers can stay prepared for anything that might befall them as the weather starts to turn.
Well, they just, they got to watch their road conditions, always watch the weather up ahead of them, kick on the news, kick it on the radio. I mean, listen, the parts of the country you're going into, you got to know what your weather's like. Make sure that they always, their safety chains for the wheels are good. And, I know they don't see them much. I don't think they pull down that panel and look at them enough, but, it doesn't hurt to give them a shot and make sure that they're all good. And,
sure. Maybe something at the beginning of the season to do, since we're talking about it. I mean, go ahead, pop your the cap on that thing and take a look at those chains. They don't get used very often. You never know if they're in good working order, I would assume.
Right. Yeah, because they just sit there on the side of the truck and, over all the miles they drive and that bouncing and shaking, they get wedged in there and they turn into like locked up rocks and it takes a little bit to get them out if they haven't moved them around. It's nice to take them out, set them on the ground, measure them out, make sure that, you got what you need and there's no damage on them. So that's the biggest thing. You want to make sure that you got that properly and make sure, just don't try and overdrive the road. I mean, that's the biggest thing. Black ice. You don't notice black ice until it's too late.
Yep. 100%. And, I have very little personal experience with a lot of things that we talk about on this podcast as far as driving is concerned. But with tire chains, I was actually on Cabbage Hill. A lot of drivers know Cabbage Hill out here, Interstate 84 in Oregon. Late at night, and we passed a log truck that had tire chains on, and one of his chains snapped off his tire and flew around and hit the back window of the Suburban I was in and completely shattered it, blew it out. I mean, you're doing, 65, 60 miles an hour up there, and very, very scary ordeal, but maybe one that could have been prevented if that driver had checked his chains for durability before that trip.
Yes. You always want to make sure they're tight, not loose, and you want to make sure that your extra's always got a bungee cord on it, so it's pulling it in so it doesn't sit there and fly in the wind.
For sure. What other types of things should I be looking for if I've been on a mountain pass recently? Maybe I just got finished with kind of a hairy drive. I made my delivery. Maybe I'm on a post-trip inspection. Is there anything that I should be keeping an eye out for that the mountain pass could have caused on the truck?
Well, if you're running through like snow or ice and stuff, just make sure that, you don't have build up everywhere that it shouldn't be. Between the drives, sometimes you'll see it pack up. The ice and snow build up in there. Ice up on your windshield. Wiper blades. Wiper blades is your biggest thing. Make sure you got a good set of wiper blades when winter comes. So that ice does build up on there, and get that stuff swept away. Make sure your defroster's working, mirror heat, everything on the truck's working in proper order. For sure. And make sure that that window washing fluid is filled up. That's another one. It's gross on your windshield after not very many miles in that type of weather. Oh, yeah.
Well, Jim, before I let you go here, I know that I'm going to end up trading a few punches with James over college football, and I have to ask because I know you're a sports guy. Are you ready for the Oregon Ducks to show up in the Big Ten next year?
Oh, I'm ready for it. I'm ready for anybody that wants to come out and play.
That's that attitude that out there in the Midwest is bring it on. You guys haven't done anything to scare us in the last 10 years. Yeah, I don't think they've done enough to scare anybody in the last 10 years. Hey, well, we did get out of Ohio State with a win a couple years ago. That's always good. Always good. Yeah, I mean, has Nebraska done that anytime recently? Yeah. I couldn't really say much on that because I really don't post for all of them. I watch it. I don't really root for a certain side. Okay. All right. Well, good. Then we can still be friends then when 2024 rolls around. Yeah, we're good with it. Yeah. Awesome. We're all good. Well, Jim, I always appreciate the insight. Thank you so much for your time. We'll be back in touch soon, okay? Yeah, no problem. That's Jim Musel, Service and Equipment Manager, H&M Trucking.
And now, H&M President James Fonda.
We've given him a couple-week break here from the podcast, but it's time to get back to hammering. Please welcome President of H&M Trucking, James Fonda, to the podcast. How we doing, James?
Hey, how's it going, Marcus?
Can't complain, man. I never can. There's nobody listening, and you're just the wrong guy to complain to because you've got enough going on. Today we're talking about managing mountain passes, and we're getting ahead of it a little bit because in talking to Dean in safety, he told us a little bit about how, chain requirements start to come into play early September for a lot of the mountainous states. Big kind of talking to everybody about, safety, that type of thing, maintenance when we talk to Jim from the shop. But from the president of the company, when it comes to managing mountain passes, what advice, what type of things would you pass on to your drivers since you've got their open ear right now?
Don't try too hard. A couple of years ago, we had a driver that went up. I'm not sure why he did this. He gave 13 different reasons. But essentially, he went up, there's like a road around Lake Tahoe. It's not meant for semis.
Right.
And long story short, he almost found himself off of a fucking cliff. So.
Oh, wow. You know what? I think we heard that story all the way back in the Unplugged OTR days. He was up a goat trail somewhere. Did they have, and he couldn't turn around, right? They had to pull him off the mountain backwards?
Yeah. Not just him. There was maybe I don't know. There's other trucks too, but yeah, it was a deal.
Well,
and he's like, I got redirected. I'm like, I promise you an officer never sent you up that pass.
Yeah, that's right, because he said he had a cop.
Tell me that all you want, but I'm going to call bullshit.
Oh, man. Well, we talked to Scott Beals, and that was one thing that he touched on towards the end of his conversation with me was, you know what? Don't put yourself up against other drivers. If you see another driver driving really fast on a mountain pass, or maybe it's icy out or whatever, just because he's doing it doesn't mean that you got to try to do it.
Right. Like, just wait. It'll pass.
Sure.
And, you know, most of the guys that have been around here, they know, like, if there's like a horrible storm that you're held up for more than a reasonable amount of time, and I usually chip in some money to make sure that they're, you know, they can still eat and got some money going home.
Sure. And I know that there was a big one last year out there in kind of I-80 going through Wyoming. There was a bunch of people that got stopped for a while last year. We talked about that, and you know, it's good to know. I think that's one of the things I always ask the drivers, like, what do you like about H&M? And they take care of you is what I hear. And I feel like that's a very broad term for kind of what you're talking about. Like, you'll kick them some money. You'll take care of them when things that are out of their control befall them on their route.
Yeah. When it's, you know, when it's like those excessive times, like it was like 4 days they're shut down for.
Wow.
And, you know, but normal stuff, like, which they all understand too. Like, you know, if they're stuck for 1 day, it's, well, we're not, you know, like, well, why can't I just go south or, you know, get around? It's like, because the customer's not paying that. And especially in today's market where their rates are just dog shit, I'm not going to just pay to do dumb things. So, you know, there's just some give and take. And that's everything in the world. So. Absolutely.
I guess with the freight market in general, it's been a lot of give lately, not much take, huh?
Right. Yeah. Something's going to give here soon.
That's what Tim told us last week. I'm excited about it. You know, it's funny because you guys talked about going all the way back to spring and even before that. A lot of you, and when I say a lot of you, I mean you and a bunch of other people that are very well tuned into the industry, told me August. We feel like we're going to see the bottom in August, and here we are, last couple days of August, got our first good news on the podcast about the market, and God knows how long. So I've got my fingers crossed.
I mean, he's trying to get some movement on the brokerage side, but it's really like the last week. They've gotten a couple wins over there. But and you know, there's been a little bit of movement now the last 2 days on the asset side. But right now, it's just still, you're just waiting for, you know, these small guys just to fall out.
Mm-hmm. Really. Sure. Well, you know what? I'm a gambling man, and I would gamble on it at this point in time. I would say it's been bad for so long. Exactly. In fact, I'm going to Vegas in about a week, James. And so, you know, if you've got any gambling advice, anything that's worked for you in the past, I'd like to come home with a fat stack of cash to spend on my wife, but it doesn't always happen that way.
You know, when I go there, I just play blackjack. Okay. You know, I'll play craps once in a while too, but blackjack, you know, I can just pull out, you know, sit there and be patient for a few hours. You typically pull through.
Sure. You a poker player at all?
A little bit, not as much.
See, I would say, like, if I just met you and never really knew anything about you and hadn't asked that question, I would guess you to be a poker player, because it always looks like you're, you know, like you're scheming, like you've got something going on back there, James. Like you're thinking 3 steps ahead. That's a poker player's mentality.
Well, I did poker nights before I was a kid. The last one I did, Leslie made me. She's like, "You need a poker night." We did one I don't know, last winter. So it's hard, you know, all my friends down, so I can kind of rally the group at once, but once in a while it worked out.
Yeah, no, it's funny, man.
I enjoy poker. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, but easier said than done sometimes. I between the company, I feel like I'm playing a little poker all the time.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. Yeah. You know, my dad started taking me to his poker nights when I was like 10, just because it was like, mom was like, get this kid out of the house. And my dad was like, well, I'm not missing poker. So I started really, really young, getting to know the game and everything like that. And it's just a miracle at this point that I'm not a degenerate gambler. So I guess we're winning somewhere. That's the way to look at it.
There you go.
And speaking of winning somewhere, I'm going to win on the football field this weekend. We got a high school JV team coming to play the Ducks. What do you got going on out there in Nebraska and Lincoln? You got any big games you're going to this weekend?
I think I wasn't really paying attention. I just realized it got snuck up on me. We played tonight. Played the Gophers.
Oh, okay. So, Minnesota.
Yeah, you know, Minnesota. You know, I really don't know what to think. I think that you know, new coach. You know, every Nebraska coach, for their first time they've ever played Minnesota, would be Minnesota. So, on that note, who the hell knows?
Well, here's something you can bet on.
And Minnesota's been pretty good for the last few years.
Yeah, they have. PJ Fleck out there. He's a good coach. Yeah. Here's something you can bet on.
They're not like Nebraska. I mean, it's not like not like Oregon. They're like a tier. They're like a lower tier, like a Duck.
I mean, you keep saying that, but I see one person in the preseason rankings, and I don't see the other.
You'll be down there soon, though. Don't give yourself time.
Well, all I was going to say is there's one thing you can bet on, and that's that you and I are going to trade punches for the entire college football season. And I'll be honest with you, I can't wait. It's my favorite time of year.
It's gonna be. Oh yes, I'm more eager for next year. Yeah. I'm already saying let's skip this year. Let's just move on to next year. Bring your happy ass over here to the Big Ten. See you get beat up a little bit. It'll be fun.
Hey, if your grandma lives in Lincoln,
so it's okay.
I'm going to steal a little line from one of my favorite football movies, Varsity Blues here. But if your grandma lives in Lincoln, tell her to batten down the hatches because the Ducks are coming to burn her house down. All right. It's going to be fun, James. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to let you get off here and get back to it. Thank you so much for your time today, and we'll talk to you soon, okay?
Yeah, have a good one.
I just love having music take me from segment to segment. If I could give you one piece of advice as a guy that does what I do, it would be get yourself some music to walk around to. Like, even if it's just a bass slide when you walk into a door, like in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, like boom, ba-doom, or maybe a Seinfeld type thing. I don't know, maybe a rim shot, like every time you walk into a room, maybe you're a jokester and you just like that, you're always telling jokes. Like you come into a room and you just get, that'd be kind of cool. I don't know. Yeah, I get to thinking about some things, and you guys have to listen. That's just the way that this goes. Thank you for downloading episode 26 of the H&M Trucking Podcast, all about managing mountain passes. I want to remind you some advice that we got from not only company president James Fonda, but also driver Scotty Beals. If you don't feel comfortable, just don't try it when it comes to mountain passes, all right? Don't watch the guy in the lane next to you and think you can do what he does. If you're not comfortable out there and you're unsure of it in any way, shape, or form, just call it quits for the day. Call your dispatcher, call your driver manager, and figure out some type of workaround. And don't let that workaround be driving up the side of a mountain. All these things end badly. I promise you that. So that's what we've learned today in this episode, and I just want to say thanks to Jim Musel, James Fonda, Scott Beals, and of course Dean Edmunds for coming on this episode and helping us out. Next week's episode is going to be that hot fire, as the kids would say. Well, they don't say that anymore. They'd probably say it's like no cap or something. I don't speak the language. I'm pushing 40. But next week's episode is all about the driver. We got another driver appreciation episode coming up next week. It's drivers from wall to wall, and I'm always looking forward to talking to more H&M drivers. So if you're interested in being on that episode, now is the time to reach out, okay? I'm scheduling them right now as we speak, and I want to talk to you if you're out there listening to me. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. Subscribing doesn't cost you 1 red cent, but it will tell you every single time we have a new episode, which don't forget is Wednesdays, 5 a.m. Central Time. You guys have been great. It's been real. It's been fun, but I gotta go. It's dinner time. Stay fresh, cheese bags.
Thank you for listening to the H&M Trucking Podcast. Please leave a review, subscribe, and connect with Marcus over at the H&M Trucking social media channels. And if you're considering a job at H&M, find us at hmtrucking.com. Until next time, stay safe and ahead of the curve drivers.